Hey everybody, this is Andrew from Fantasy Football. And in this video, I'm going to help you become a better fantasy football auction drafter. Before we get started, I just want you to know that this isn't a video on how to auction draft, it's a video on just improving your skills within the game. In any fantasy football auction draft that you do, there will always be two very popular groups of auction drafters. You will always have the auction drafters who are really cheap. And then you will have the other group of auction drafters who are still really cheap but are afraid to be called cheap. And then when those two groups of people get together, it just gets crazy. You'll notice that a lot of the drafters who are cheap will try and go for a lot of sleepers and RB2s and wide receivers 2s because that's where they feel like they'll find the best bang for their buck. But then when one of the teams who is cheap is trying to get Kerryon Johnson and another team that's cheap thinks that that's a great deal, they'll just actually end up bidding against each other, and then Kerryon Johnson will go for like $48. And then in the next nomination, David Johnson will go, and everyone knows that David Johnson, he's going to be expensive, and he'll end up going for $55, and then the cheap people will get together and make fun of the guy who got David Johnson for $55. And then the people who are cheap but are afraid to be called cheap, they'll go for players like Melvin Gordon, Zeke Elliott, Antonio Brown. Those players right now, they're Ferraris that are missing a tire. But if you look at the Ferrari from the side that is not missing the tire, it looks great. And you can't say that that guy was being cheap because he has a Ferrari. And if I just happen to go and see the car from the right side, oh my god, this guy is a freaking baller. My main point for my first tip though is that you have to keep your cool when you see prices that are really high or really low, because those crazy prices, they do set off ripple effects that you can take advantage of later on in the draft. Tiering your players is a very popular and common piece of advice that I've heard in many different forums. It is applicable in both snake and auction formats, but in my opinion, this is something you must do for an auction draft. I'll give you an example. Let's say that you have Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, and Alvin Kamara. You think that each of these players are going to have similar production this season, hence the tier. Your auction then starts and Christian McCaffrey goes for $65. It is up to you to find out as fast as you can on whether or not that was expensive, cheap, or the median. Later on in that draft, if Saquon went for 74 and Alvin Kamara went for, let's say, 68, then in retrospect, you would have wanted to have jumped on McCaffrey when he was at 65, maybe getting him for 66. I know what you're thinking. We're not all some omniscient higher beings who know exactly how much everyone is going to go for in the draft. Because if that was the case, then we would just dominate every single draft. But trying to get the cheapest player in the tier that I made for myself is a conditional goal that I can easily, every auction draft, try and achieve. This is one of the tips where personal preference comes into play. But one general tip is to figure out your roster construction while you are drafting, not before you come to the draft. Do not set specific budgets for positions on your roster before you enter the draft. You don't even know what the market's going to be like. For example, saying like, I'm only going to spend $20 on my running back 2 or $10 for my flex. This tip has probably had the most positive impact on my auction drafts over the past couple of years. Even though my heart in a lot of these drafts tells me that I should overpay for someone who has given me success in the past, like a Julio Jones, I know that what I should do is follow my market, follow the tier that I put Julio in. To me, Julio was in a tier with DeAndre Hopkins and Devontae Adams. I should just go for whichever one of the three is the cheapest and just try and go for that rather than just go with Julio. I cannot tell you how many auction drafts I have done where other teams will come into a draft wanting to get very specific players rather than follow the market, and just some teams just aren't willing to spend $35 on a good deal for a quality player if it means that that $35 isn't going to go towards the player that they were targeting. I think that is a huge mistake in succeeding in getting value in auction drafts. This is the first tip that doesn't really have to do with necessarily drafting your team, but it's definitely something that you can do while you are drafting, offline or online. If you feel like you're getting close to winning a player, you need to slow down the pace of the bidding. Some offline drafts have a timer, but for sure every single online auction draft has a timer. Don't put your bid in until the very last second. You want to slow the pace down so that your opponent has to think on every dollar if this is something that they want to commit to. Don't get into a situation where you're going back and forth between you and the other person you're bidding against when the amount is getting high. It's another incentive for them to stick around because they won't have time to think on whether or not they want to stick around or not. And it's fun just going 52, 53, 54, 55. Snake drafts and auction drafts have one very big thing in common. They are both just one part of the fantasy football season. Sometimes good drafts will carry you till the end, but you know the drill. Injuries, waiver wires, and performance variables are what make up most championships. What I can tell you though is that if you follow these tips, you'll have a good chance of making the playoffs, because I've pretty much followed these tips ever since I've started doing auction drafts, and I honestly can't remember the last time I didn't make a playoffs. This video I made had more general tips, but I will be making a video that has more specific tips on how to identify markets, how I use the tier-based strategy to draft my own teams during auctions. And I'm really excited to tell everyone this, but I'm going to be making a video series that will follow one of my main teams that went through an auction draft that already happened. There will be vlog content. I'll be going in depth in my team and my roster construction, my thought process going through it. Thank you so much again for watching this video. Please like, comment, or subscribe if you like this, and I have so much more fun stuff coming up. Good luck to everyone in your drafts. This is probably